Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back into 12th century England, specifically to the sleepy village of Woolpit in Suffolk, where the biggest scandal wasn't war taxes or dragons, but a pair of mysteriously green children who simply showed up one day. You're standing at the edge of a sun-dappled wheat field, the stalks rustling in a gentle breeze. You can hear the rhythmic clink of sickles, the low murmur of reapers swapping gossip, when suddenly something odd breaks the rhythm. A muffled gasp, a dropped scythe, and then hushed voices. Over by one of the wolf pits, yes, actual holes in the ground, meant to trap wolves, there are children. Not just any children. They're green. Not metaphorically. Actually green. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this century. For starters, everyone's suspicious of everything. The wells might give you dysentery. The bread might have ergot. And the average life expectancy, not great. But here you are, a helpful onlooker in sandals, maybe holding a cheesecloth bundle of apples, just trying not to draw too much attention. The villagers are already murmuring. 2 children, pale-haired, but tinged green, clad in strange metallic fabric, barefoot and dazed, stand blinking in the light. They look no older than 7 or 8. They're holding each other's hands tightly, clearly afraid but otherwise unharmed. They don't cry. They don't speak. And when one of the harvesters tries to approach the girl, backs away, her eyes wide, as if she doesn't recognise the language. This is 12th century Woolpit, named for its wolf pits, and wedged between Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket. You're in a quiet little pocket of England, in the reign of either King Stephen or Henry II. Historians still bicker about the exact year. The church bells toll, occasionally the roads are muddy, and the livestock outnumber the people. You wander closer. The kids aren't feral, just completely disoriented. The boy, thinner and shorter, clings to his sister, like she's the only familiar thing in the world. You notice their clothes are unlike anything you've seen threaded, with an almost metallic sheen, coloured deep green and copper, with seams that seem both too precise and too fragile. They speak eventually, but no one understands them. Their language is unfamiliar. Not French, not Latin, not even the curious dialects from the Danelaw regions. It sounds soft and musical, with clipped vowels and lots of consonant blends that don't seem to go together. A local bailiff scratches his head and decides this is above his pay grade. Eventually someone suggests taking them to the manor. Maybe Sir Richard de Calne can figure it out. He's a minor noble with a decent reputation, which in medieval terms means only moderately cruel. As you walk behind the small party, the sun starts to dip low, and the sky blushes pink. The children march quietly occasionally, glancing at one another, whispering words no one can pass. One of the older women fusses with her apron and mutters something about fairy changelings under her breath. Because you see, this is a time when folklore isn't just bedtime stories, it's unofficial policy. Fairies or real witches are feared, and the woods are full of things best left alone. 2 green kids popping out of a wolf trap. That's not a medical issue, that's a potential curse. But even curses need dinner. Back at the manor, the children are offered bread. They don't touch it. Apples. Nope. Cheese. The boy gags at the smell. For days they refuse all food, growing weaker and thinner, until someone offers them freshly picked broad beans still in the pod. The girl perks up. The boy grabs for them. They crack open the pods with fingers still trembling and devour the beans like starving squirrels. And just like that, they're alive again. Villagers whisper. The monks from Bury St Edmunds begin taking notes. There's something here, something worth recording, something unusual enough to survive the ages, even if no one writes it down quite the same way. Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh will both write about this someday. But you lucky listener get to see it unfold up close. You're not alarmed. You're intrigued. What child eats only raw beans and speaks in no known tongue? What kind of place produces green people who fear the sun? You sit in the manor's stone kitchen, your back to a warm oven, watching the girl tilt her head at a flickering candle as though the flame is a marvel. The boy's stomach rumbles after a second helping of beans. A cat jumps onto the windowsill and startles him. He laughs a high, breathy sound, and for the first time the mood softens. You're here for it, all the tiny domestic moments that never made it into any chronicle. The woolen blankets, the chipped wooden bowls, the barely there grin on the girl's face as she sees her first butterfly. No one here knows what they're dealing with, but for now, they're just kids. Weird kids. But kids all the same. The next morning arrives slowly, with rooster crows that feel more like declarations than alarm clocks. You stir on a straw-stuffed cot in the corner of the manor's great hall, blinking up at wooden beams and catching a faint draught that smells of oats and dust. The manor kitchen is already clinking to life, but your ears pick up the real curiosity before your eyes do. The children are awake. You pad quietly across the floor in woolen socks and peek into the room where they slept. The girl is sitting upright, legs crossed neatly beneath her, plucking at the edge of her strange green garment, as if trying to decide whether it belongs to her. Her brother lies curled next to her, breathing steadily, cheeks less hollow than they were yesterday. On the stool nearby is a small bowl filled with, you guessed it, broad beans. 2 more pods lie open beside it, their contents nibbled with care. Their skin still holds that peculiar green tint. Not an unnatural neon glow, mind you, but a dull olive underlay, like someone rubbed them lightly with sage leaves, or steeped them in pea broth. You wonder if it's poor nutrition, or some kind of iron issue. Historians have argued over this very detail for centuries. Was it hyperchromic anemia, arsenic exposure? Or something far stranger? You lean in. The girl glances up. Her eyes are dark and steady. She says something, 2 words, maybe 3. Her voice is soft, lilting, like wind whistling through reeds. It's the kind of language that seems like it should be spoken in rhyme or sung. You smile, unsure how to respond. She doesn't press. Later the villagers trickle in again. Curiosity is a stronger force than any curfew. Children are shooed back, though a few manage to sneak peeks through the windows. No one knows what to make of the green kids who fell from nowhere. A few lean toward divine punishment, others toward mischief. The older midwife suggests something about bog spirits. You overhear a blacksmith mutter that they must be demons, but he's mostly annoyed they didn't bring any coin. A friar from a nearby monastery arrives by donkey robes, hitched up to avoid the mud. He peers closely at the children and jots down notes on parchment. He tries Latin first, then a smattering of Norman French. Nothing. The girl tilts her head like she recognises a syllable now and then, but her replies are always in that soft, humming tongue no one can pin down. Linguists centuries later would wonder whether it was a now-lost dialect of Anglo-Flemish, or something entirely fabricated by children trying to shield themselves from trauma. But then there's the matter of their clothes. You take a closer look today. The fabric is delicate but sturdy like linen, blended with something smoother. The seams are almost invisible. No embroidery, no heraldic sigils, no markings of rank or region. Just practical, undecorated clothing that doesn't belong to any known village or estate. You trail behind them through the gardens later that day. The girl plucks at a sprig of mint and sniffs it, intrigued. The boy picks up a worm and drops it with a squeal. They seem more at ease in the shade and less so under direct sun. Their skin darkens further when they're hot, like a green flush spreading across their cheeks. You can't help but wonder if the colour is natural at all. Could it be some reaction? A stain from unusual soil? Fava bean toxicity? Oh, yes, favour beans again. you'll hear a lot about them. The cook attempts a different meal that evening. She's boiled a few eggs, added some pottage, and slipped a chunk of cheese beside the plate. The girl sniffs each item carefully. She nibbles the egg. No gagging. Progress. The boy is more reluctant. He pokes at everything and eventually eats only the beans again. You sit nearby, chewing slowly on barley bread, watching the candlelight flicker against their oddly tinted faces. There's something gentle about the way they exist. They don't panic. They don't complain. They move with quiet intention, holding hands when the corridor grows cold, pressing foreheads together, when one of them wakes from a dream. The manor servants begin to warm to them. A few even try mimicking their odd words, though mostly it ends in laughter. And then of course come the questions. Where did they come from? How did they get here? Why are they green? You sit by the hearth one night and listen to theories bloom like mould. Some swear they're from a hidden country underground, a place lit by perpetual twilight and thick with bean fields. Others suggest they were cursed for stealing from a saint's orchard. One boy swears he saw them float down from a cloud, but he's been hit in the head by a mule before, so no one gives it much weight. Meanwhile, the girl begins to understand a few English words. Her mouth still stumbles over the consonants, but she's trying. You catch her murmuring bread under her breath as she holds a crust. One of the servants beams with pride as though teaching a toddler. The boy, though, he's growing weaker. His limbs shake when he walks. He shivers even when wrapped in wool. No one knows why. Some blame the lack of proper food. Others whisper darker things. There's something unnameable in his fading strength that silences the laughter. You sit outside that night staring at the stars trying to make sense of it. Maybe the green was never the real mystery. Maybe it's what's hidden inside these kids, the secrets of where they've been, what they've seen, and what the world did to them before they fell into a pit in Woolpit. By the end of the week, Woolpit has reached its limit of bean-related gossip. You wake to the soft clang of pots and hushed whispers from the manor kitchen. The girl, still unnamed, still green, is eating a warm bowl of mashed peas. It's not quite her favourite, but she doesn't make a face, which is progress. The boy isn't with her this morning. You glance around, feeling that faint prickle of absence. One of the maids gives you a quiet shake of her head. Still sleeping. Still weak. The manor has done what it can, blankets stew careful kindness. But 12th century medicine isn't exactly renowned for subtlety or success. No antibiotics, no multivitamins. Just a handful of dried herbs, a whispered prayer, and the vague hope that your humours realign before you run out of days. The girl watches you with calm curiosity. She points to your shoes and says a word that might mean leather, or might just mean foot prison. You smile anyway. Food becomes the villagers' obsession. It's the easiest mystery to grasp. Why did these children reject bread and fruit? Why did they eat beans like they were a returning lifeline? Some say their bodies couldn't handle regular food. Others suggest a symbolic reason beans being linked to resurrection in ancient cultures. The Romans believed they held the souls of the dead after all. Not that the villagers are citing Roman metaphysics, mind you. They're mostly just worried about why someone would choose legumes over roasted duck. You head into the village square later that day. It's market time. Chickens flapping wool, being weighed a man trying to sell spoiled pears with truly aggressive optimism. But what everyone's really selling is speculation. One man claims he saw the children arrive in a shaft of green light. Another swears they're Welsh. A third is convinced it's a trick by the devil, though he's also convinced that freckles are demonic, so his credibility is flexible. But then you hear something new. Someone mentions the famine. It turns out the region has had its fair share of disruptions lately. Crops failed last season. Some nearby villages are thin on supplies. Maybe the children wandered in from one of those half-starved hamlets, sick with something strange traumatized into silence. You pause. That theory is so practical it's almost disappointing. Back at the manor, the girl is learning to chew bread. Slowly, deliberately. She still grimaces at the crust, but her appetite is expanding. She begins to speak more clearly, still heavily accented, but some words start to stick. Names, colours, animals. You watch her point to the fire and say sun, but with a slight hesitation, like it doesn't quite match her memory. Then she points to the hearthstones and says a different word, softer, more reverent. You jot it down. No one knows what it means. Maybe home. Maybe warm. Maybe please let this not be a dream. It's during a walk in the garden that she tells her first full sentence in English. There is no sun in our land. You blink. The servant beside you nearly drops her basket. The girl nods slowly as though affirming her own words. Only twilight, always green light. You stare at her. The boy isn't with you today, he's resting again, but the girl stands tall, almost proud, as if describing a place no one else has seen, and she's the only ambassador it ever sent. That night, you sit by the hearth again, and the friar, back from a trip to collect some herbs, scribbles in his notes. He's no scientist, but he's heard many tales, and he says something that lingers. Perhaps they are not from this world, but one beside it. You don't know whether to scoff or lean in. The children's diet continues to expand. The girl eats dried plums, tries cheese again, still hates it. She's starting to enjoy meat, though only in very small bites. Her skin is still tinted green, but less so than before. Maybe nutrition is playing its role after all. You ask the friar what he makes of it. He mutters something about chlorosis, a green sickness caused by a lack of iron. It makes people pale fatigued, sometimes green-tinted. Some historians, centuries later, will run with this theory. Others will argue it couldn't account for the girl's language, her vivid descriptions, or the boy's strange decline. Scholars still argue whether they were real refugees or figments of medieval metaphor. And then there's the strange little detail you almost missed. The girl says they weren't alone. You lean in. She describes others like her, and her brother, people who lived underground or inside hills in homes carved of stone with green skies above and no sun in the sky. Just a constant glow. You think of caves. You think of mines. But she speaks of fields, of rivers, of beans, of course. That's when it clicks for someone in the room. They might have come from a subterranean place. The term doesn't exist yet, but later thinkers will call it the hollow earth theory. It was fringe then, it's fringe now, but it's just tantalizing enough to keep rolling forward. What if there's another realm beneath this one? Of course, you're just a humble bystander with a napkin and a growing headache, but the notion lingers. You head outside to clear your thoughts and find yourself staring at the Woolpit where the children were first found. It's quiet now, just a simple hole in the ground. But you wonder, how deep did it go? Was it just a trap? Or a passage? You don't jump in. You're not that curious. But you do sit beside it, staring down at the packed earth and wondering how two small green children wandered up into this world, and why they didn't bring more beans with them. The days stretch on gentle and oddly repetitive, like the slow churn of a butter paddle, or the dull clink of pewter cups on a manor table. The girl grows stronger. Her face, while still tinged with that soft olive hue, is rounder now, cheeks less hollow, voice more confident. She speaks short, simple English phrases in the mornings, always greeted with nods and wide-eyed approval, as if each word is a tiny miracle. She learns thank you, then sleep, then beans, though that one she probably already knew. The boy, though he's fading, he barely moves anymore, sleeps most of the day, eats very little even of his beloved beans. You bring him a bowl one afternoon, sit at his bedside, and watch as he fingers the pods weakly, but never opens them. His eyes drift closed again without a word. People start whispering, not with cruelty, but that hushed sorrow townsfolk reserve for things they can't control. Some think he was already dying when they arrived. Others blame the air, the food, even the sun. You hear one theory whispered in confidence by a shepherd, that the boy's soul belonged somewhere else. And now that he's here, he simply doesn't know how to keep going. You sit outside again that evening, this time beneath a pale yellow moon. The girl joins you carefully wrapped in a shawl, feet bare against the cool stones. She watches the sky with that same tilted curiosity you've seen in toddlers and philosophers. He is going, she says softly. He wants the green again. You pause. The green. She nods. Not beans. The green, all around. The light, the land, the cold river. You wonder what she means. Is it memory? Is it metaphor? Is it the fever dream of a traumatized child? Historians still argue whether the children's descriptions were literal symbolic, or born from imagination. Some think the green land was simply a war-torn village with weird light through the trees. Others speculate about underground civilizations. One bold theory even suggests they were part of a now lost migratory group, perhaps Flemish peasants displaced during a border conflict. The language, possibly a forgotten dialect. The green hue may be a byproduct of starvation or malnutrition. But none of that explains the most important thing why their stories were so strange and so consistent. In the days that follow, the boy weakens further. The manor's healer offers warm compresses, murmured blessings and fennel tea, which is as effective as it sounds. The girl stays close to him, humming in that soft, unknown language. You think the songs sound sad, but there's no way to be sure. And then one morning, he's gone. No wailing, no dramatic last words, just stillness like dew disappearing from the grass. The manor holds a quiet service. A grave is dug beneath a small oak tree near the edge of the Woolpit. You stand there with the others' hands folded, not quite knowing what to pray for. He never had a name you could pronounce. The girl is quiet that day, not tearful, just quiet. She clutches a green bean pod in one hand the whole time and doesn't let go of it, even after the grave is filled. Later you find it tucked beneath her pillow. She doesn't mention him again, not directly. But in the weeks that follow, she leans harder into learning English. She eats more. She starts asking questions. You think maybe it's her way of surviving, or maybe forgetting, or maybe both. One morning you find her kneeling in the garden staring at a patch of sunlit earth. She turns to you and says, "Our land was under this." You blink. Underground. She nods once. We walked, long time, dark, then boom, light, loud light, boom. You try to get her to explain, but she doesn't have the words. She gestures downward, then spreads her arms as if something burst outward. You picture a cave collapse, or a tunnel exit, or maybe, just maybe, an accidental crossing from one world to another if you're feeling poetic. Which frankly you are. The boy is gone. The girl is learning, and your mind keeps tugging at the edge of myth. You remember tales of fairy mounds of children snatched and replaced, of travellers who crossed into lands where time moved differently. Could it be a fairyland story flipped on its head, instead of a human stolen into the other realm? What if these children stumbled out? You're not alone in that thought. One of the friars, who's taken a rather suspicious liking to pipe tobacco, mentions an old tale about hollow hills where people lived in twilight. He wonders aloud if the children found their way out accidentally or were cast out. Maybe they broke a rule. Maybe they wandered too far. Or maybe they were sent. You shiver a little, even though the fire's warm. The girl begins to join daily life more fully. She helps in the kitchen, sorts herbs, with the friar sweeps the flagstones in the manor hall. She hums when she works. Always the same tune, low winding, a bit eerie, like wind in the rafters. You hum it too sometimes without realising. Her skin is paler now, still faintly greenish like she's been eating spinach for weeks, but much less than before. It seems the farther she moves from that other place, wherever it was, the more human she becomes. If she notices, she doesn't say. But one night, you catch her standing outside near the Woolpit. Again, bare feet, in the grass, eyes turned to the stars. "Do you miss it?" you ask. She doesn't look at you. Yes. "But I am here now." You nod, though she's not looking. And for the first time you don't feel the need to ask anything else. The days settle into their own kind of rhythm. Sunrise chores, beans still a favourite. Then hushed conversation over warm bread and roasted roots. The girl, she goes by no name yet, though some of the manor folk have taken to calling her Green Agnes, with an affectionate sort of shrug, has become less a mystery and more a routine. People greet her without hesitation now. She answers, sometimes even smiles. You watch her sweep the flagstone floor of the chapel one morning, hair tied back with a strip of wool cloth. She hums her strange melody as she works, occasionally pausing to peer through the stained glass windows, their colours painting soft swatches on her face. You catch a glimpse of her reflection on the stone. Her skin is still unusual, yes, but no longer alarming. Just part of her. And then one grey afternoon she begins to speak, not in broken phrases but full sentences. Her words are stilted, awkward in places, but clear. And what she says makes every candle in the chapel seem to flicker slightly. "We lived, Undida," she says, "where it is always dusk, not dark, not light." You glance around. No one's prompted her. This isn't a rehearsed tale. This is something she's been piecing together, carrying, waiting to share. You nod. Let her speak. There was no sun. Only green sky. Everything green. The trees. The water. The skin. She touches her own arm, gently, almost wistfully. "We did not know light could be yellow." You take a slow breath. The friar, across the room, stops sorting his scrolls. Everyone listens. "We followed the animals one day, chasing sound. Then came a loud wind, a shaking. We fell." "You fell," you ask. She nods. "There was hole, a pit, not like yours. It was warm. Then we woke here." The villagers begin to talk quietly at first, then louder. Speculation again. Always speculation. Some believe her instantly. Others mutter about devils and trickery. A few simply think it's a child's fantasy built around trauma and fear. But her calm, quiet tone makes it hard to brush off. A merchant passing through from Stowmarket hears the tale and brings it to his brother, a monk, with an interest in the unusual. That monk writes a letter. Another version of the story appears in a nearby monastery's records. The tale is already growing, drifting, stretching into the folklore ether, and all the while the girl continues learning. She tries new foods, roasted leeks, boiled eel. Not a fan, even custard. She's fond of sweet things, though she says nothing is sweet in the Greenland. You wonder if they had taste at all, or if it was something they never needed. She begins helping the steward with small sums and letters, repeating phrases and copying them carefully with a quill you gifted her. The friar asks her what the land was called. She frowns. "St. Martin's Land." He blinks. "Named for a saint." She shakes her head. "Not a man. A place. No one knows what that means. not even her. Historians centuries later will tangle themselves over this name. Was it a mistranslation? A misremembered term? An allegory? Some say it hints at religious symbolism, the land of saints, the souls of purgatory. Others suggest a literal village, possibly named after Saint Martin of Tours, hidden deep in forest or fen, lost to time or flood. You don't know, but the name sticks with you. The manor's rhythm continues. Winter creeps slowly toward Woolpit, coating the edges of things in frost, and making the morning loaves steam dramatically when broken open. The girl, Agnes as Moore now call her, wraps herself in wool layers, and takes to tending the fire. She laughs when she sees snow for the first time, tries to eat it, immediately regrets that choice. You walk with her along the edges of the manor lands one cold afternoon, the earth hard beneath your feet. She points to a molehill and asks if that's how your people enter the under. You nearly choke laughing. She doesn't get the joke. That makes it funnier. Back inside, she sits by the fire, carefully peeling the skin off roasted chestnuts. She asks questions now too. Why do people marry? What is a priest? Why do stars move? You answer as best you can, and always aware that every answer births two more questions. She is in many ways still a mystery, but a living one. No longer just a tale, no longer just the green child. She's becoming Agnes, fully. The friar remarks one evening she's like a page in a book that turned into a chapter. And he's not wrong, but you still think about the boy, the brother, the other half of the story. You wonder what might have changed if he'd survived, if he'd spoken, if he'd confirmed or challenged her version of events. You'll never know, but maybe that's what makes the tale linger. The children's arrival no longer dominates Woolpit's whispers, but their presence has etched itself into the village, like the soft groove of a stream into stone. People still glance at the wolf pit as they pass. Children howl one another to touch its edges. And Agnes, for all her strange beginnings, has settled into the world as if she's always belonged. But that voice she has, that song she hums while baking or sorting beans, you still don't recognise the tune. And you suspect you never will. The air in Woolpit turns heavy with the damp breath of late autumn. You wake to mornings steeped in fog, where the manor's chimneys puff little ghosts into the sky, and puddles gather like gossip at the edges of the road. Inside the stone walls, the fire never really dies, it just dozes. Agnes, by now, a familiar fixture in this medieval postcard, begins to talk more openly. You no longer have to coax stories from her. She offers them like old songs, finally remembered. We had no sun, she tells the friar, one fog-blurred afternoon. The light came from the sky, but it was always green. Not bright, not dark, just there. You sit with her near the hearth, listening as she twists wool yarn into a messy braid. Her language is still shaped by odd grammar and misused idioms, but her meaning comes through clearer each day. She's remembering more to fragments of places and people. Our home was by water, she says, but not like this. She waves vaguely toward the village stream. Ours did not move. A lake, the steward asks. She shakes her head. It glowed. You don't press her. At this point, you've learned that trying to force logic into her memories is like trying to map a dream with a carpenter's square. Better to let it unravel on its own. She mentions Saint Martin again this time as a being, not a place. He watches the land, keeps it. He is not saint like here. This catches the friar off guard. He scribbles something hastily in the margin of his notes. A guardian, he asks. Agnes nods. Yes. Guardian. He walks sometimes, not speaks. You shiver despite the fire. The friar isn't the only one archiving her words. A travelling scribe visiting the manor for a week becomes deeply fascinated with Agnes's tale. He begins a written account, eager to send it to an abbey in Canterbury. You peek at a few pages and find phrases like verdant children of the pit and land of half-light beneath the crust. He's clearly leaning into the drama. It doesn't seem to bother Agnes. She reads bits of it aloud, stumbling over the Latin, but smiling anyway. He makes it prettier, she jokes. Still, the details she offers are consistent. Always the green sky. Always the quiet. Always a world where the sun never rises, nor sets, just hangs unseen behind something. As if the whole place is stuck in that dim moment before dawn. Historians will later argue over the possibility of her twilight world. Some propose natural phenomena, perhaps a deep forest community, where the canopy blocked most light. Others suggest psychological conditions, childhood trauma, grief-induced delusion, or cultural displacement. Then there are the more speculative corners of scholarship, ancient tunnels, mythical lands, parallel dimensions, tucked just beneath the topsoil of Suffolk. You sip your ale and wonder how many of these theories are actually less strange than just accepting her version outright. And then there's the question of how she got out. We walked into a cave, she says one evening, chasing our goats. Or goats chased us. I forget. The friar tilts his head. There are goats in your world. Yes, she nods, amused. Much like here, but smaller, more quiet. You suppress a smile. Quiet goats. That's a new one. She continues. The cave was warm, like summer air. Then it went cold. We kept walking. Long time. Then, a hole. We fell. Or climbed. Or both. She shrugs. You can almost picture it, two children chasing animals, or being chased, slipping through a cave that shouldn't have been there, into a land that wasn't expecting them. And then blinking into sunlight for the first time, falling through a wolf trap, an opening no one thought led to anything but soil and old bones. Were they from a forgotten village, buried under earth? A cave-dwelling group that kept to themselves? Or something older, stranger, less defined? The steward floats a theory after supper that makes everyone pause mid-bite. What if the children were part of a lost mining community? One cut off long ago, living in tunnels or sinkholes, where strange minerals discoloured their skin and isolated their culture. It's not a bad theory, except for the glowing river, and the goats, and the saint who walks without speaking. Still, it adds another thread to the growing tapestry. Agnes listens to all these ideas and offers no corrections. Maybe she says often with a cryptic little grin. You spend a morning with her walking the perimeter of the manor, skirting the frost-tipped hedges, and the wolf pit now mostly filled in for safety. She stops by the oak tree where her brother is buried. She doesn't say anything, just stands there. You stand too. After a long silence, she says, "He wouldn't have liked it here." You nod, not asking why. "But I do," she adds, then smiles. "I like bread now. It feels like a turning point. A gentle one, but real. Like her roots are starting to settle in this place, even as part of her always looks toward the dirt, as if something familiar still hums beneath her feet." Back at the manor, the friar asks her to draw the land she came from. She frowns at the parchment, squints at the ink. "It's hard," she says. "Not flat. All curves, no straight." She draws anyway. A loop, a spiral, a series of archways that seem to overlap. Then a single bean, carefully inked and shaded. You and the friar exchange a glance. No words. Later that night, you dream of curved staircases and rivers made of green light and wake up with the taste of beans in your mouth, though you didn't eat any the day before. There's a quiet dignity to Sir Richard de Calne's manner, especially now that winter is creeping across the landscape in soft, deliberate strides. The gardens lie dormant under a light crust of frost. The livestock are grumpier than usual, and even the roosters seem to crow more thoughtfully. but inside the stone walls echo with slow conversation, the scent of root stew and the occasional clatter of a dropped ladle. Agnes has become part of this rhythm. She tends the fire in the main hall. She helps the steward count potatoes, even if she still doesn't trust the abacus. She listens more than she speaks, but when she does speak, it's with that serene cadence that has a way of quieting the room. One day Sir Richard himself calls her in. You're standing just outside the solar, watching from a respectful distance, as the nobleman, grey-bearded and cloaked in something that probably once cost half a cow, gestures to a low bench. Agnes sits. She doesn't fidget. She's not intimidated. It's a calm scene, more tutor and student than lord and servant. He asks about her land. Again. But this time she goes further. There was no sun, she begins, as always. But light, yes. Green. The plants glowed a little. The stones too. Even the air. You lean in. Sir Richard scribbles notes the corners of his parchment curled with age. And where is this land, he asks, gently. Agnes hesitates. I do not know. Beneath. But not straight. More curled. Sir Richard exchanges a glance with the friar, who stands nearby, holding a candle that's burning unevenly. Curled like a tunnel, the friar offers. Agnes shrugs. More like a shell. This is new. You can almost feel the friar's pulse quicken. A shell. She nods. We walked inside it, like the inside of a snail. The green was deeper the farther in. It's not the kind of answer that fits into maps or travel logs, but you don't want it to. There's something beautiful about how imprecise it is. The manor servants call her our little enigma now. A cook gives her scraps of honeyed oatcake. The steward lets her handle the key to the pantry, a significant act of trust in a century where theft gets you branded. Agnes handles the key like it's a sacred relic. That night she joins in with a song by the hearth. It's the first time you've heard her sing something you recognise a ballad from the eastern coast. She still pronounces a maiden as Mathan, but she carries the tune with eerie grace. The friar nearly drops his quill when he hears her harmony. It's easy to forget where she came from, but not for long. One morning a group of monks from Bury St Edmunds arrives unannounced. They've heard the story twice, removed twisted by rumour, and they've come to interview her. You can tell by the way they carry their scrolls and furrow their brows that this isn't casual curiosity. They want answers. They want theology. They want control. They ask questions like arrows. What language did you speak? What are the teachings of St. Martin? Are there priests in your land where you baptized? Agnes stares at them, blinking slowly. She answers patiently, but she doesn't give them what they want. There were no churches, she says. No bells, just silence and walking. One of the monks writes heathen realm in the margin of his scroll and underlines it twice. You bite your tongue. Later, after the monks have left, trudging through mud and mumbling about writing a formal letter to the bishop, Agnes looks at you and says, "Why do they want me to be like them?" You don't have a good answer. Sir Richard, to his credit, doesn't press her. He sees value in letting her be. He invites scholars, yes, but only ones who listen more than they speak. One such visitor, a monk named Alric, listens to her for 3 days before offering a theory that gives you pause. She may be a metaphor. You raise an eyebrow. Not just a girl, he continues, but a symbol of something lost, of something we've forgotten. You consider that, historians in centuries to come will float the same idea that Agnes and her brother weren't literal green children, but stand-ins for social trauma, displaced peoples, or even the fading belief in otherworldly realms. But it's hard to hold that view. When she's right there beside you, wrapping your hands in wool mittens, she stitched herself and saying, "You forget your fingers." She's not an idea. She's Agnes. Still, her presence draws speculation like moths to a lantern. Travellers from surrounding shires begin to stop by, hoping for a glimpse. Some bring gifts. Others bring nonsense glass beads. Charms one man, even offers a goose as a marriage token. Sir Richard sends him away before Agnes has to ask what a marriage token is. Through it all, she remains steady. Her English sharpens. Her accent softens. Her skin, still kissed by green, becomes less striking, more like a fading memory you almost can't name. But every so often, when she thinks no one is watching, she stares down into the well at the edge of the manor yard. Not into the water, beyond it. As though she's listening for footsteps. It's a market day in Woolpit, and the streets are a chattering stream of baskets, burlap, and barely suppressed haggling. You wander past stalls selling everything from onions the size of fists to questionable pottery labelled blessed. A local musician strums a 2-string lyre badly. Children dart under carts. You spot Agnes by the weaver's tent, gently running her fingers along a strip of dyed wool the colour of moss after rain. The merchant chuckles. "You'd like green?" he says, not unkindly. She nods but doesn't respond. You catch her glancing at the cloth, with a look that's not quite longing, more like remembering. She buys a small scrap with a coin she earned helping the steward sort grain weights. The cloth disappears into her apron pocket. Back at the manor, she sits near the fire and begins speaking of her home again, unprompted. "We had cows," she says, "but not brown, greenish, like moss on stone. You blink. Green cows." She nods. Everything had the green, even the sky, even the river. Sir Richard is nearby sharpening a quill. He pauses. The river glowed, yes, Agnes hums in agreement. Soft light, like a candle, but all over. You think of algae, of phosphorescence, of bioluminescence, though no one here has that word yet. Maybe her world wasn't supernatural, just natural, in a way we've forgotten or never knew. She continues, even the ground gave light, not bright, just always seeing. You wonder aloud, half joking, did the people glow too? She considers, not like light, but like we came from it. The friar sitting across the hall lets out a slow exhale. Theologically ambiguous, he mutters scribbling luminous anthropology into his parchment. That evening, as the fire dies down and the manor quiets, Agnes pulls out the green cloth she bought. She holds it to the candlelight and squints. "This is close," she whispers, "but not quite. What's missing, you ask?" She doesn't answer at first. Then ours was green that you feel, like warmth and memory. You don't know what that means. You're not sure she does either. But it stays with you. In the following days she starts to draw again. Not just curled tunnels or bean fields, but scenes her version of home. A horizon with no sun. Trees that bend like arches. A goat with luminous eyes. A field of beans stretching to the edge of the page. You bring her more parchment. She fills it with careful lines and deliberate strokes, each image more vivid than the last. She names none of them. Visitors come and go. Some ask her to repeat the same story. Others want new details. She obliges but never elaborates beyond what she's already said. It's not stubbornness, it's certainty. She's not inventing. She's remembering. And in those memories, the world is not scary or foreign, it's simply different. One afternoon, while gathering herbs with the cook, Agnes mentions that in her land people rarely spoke aloud. Why not, you ask? We did not need words, just sounds, feeling sounds. You glance at the friar again. He looks halfway between wonder and theological panic. Telepathy, he mouths to you. Maybe. You ask what the people were like. Like me, she says. But not lost. You think she means not separated, not lonely. Then she adds, and none of them got weaker. Your heart sinks a little. You know who she means. The boy. Her brother. You realise she hasn't spoken of him since that one moment by the tree. But now the memory peeks through quiet and tender. He loved the goats, she says. Would not stop chasing them. I told him no. He went anyway. You sit beside her in the herb garden, watching bees crawl into frozen flowers that shouldn't still bloom. You don't say anything. He was too curious, she says softly. That's why we ended here. You finally ask, do you miss it? The green place. Agnes turns to you, then looks back at the dirt beneath her knees. Yes. But I know now. It is not up. You frown. What do you mean? She places a hand on the soil. It is not above us, not the stars. It is under. Annals. And sealed. You remember the phrase she used earlier, like a shell. Somewhere beneath your feet. Maybe if you believe her, there's an entire world curved inward, glowing faintly full of mossy cows and glowing rivers sealed off like a memory in a locket. You don't know if it's true, but you find yourself walking softer over the earth for days afterward, as if it might be listening. And that night, as the wind rattles the window panes and the fire hisses in its final sigh, you dream of green light again, this time coming from beneath your bed, not above your head. You wake to the slow crackle of frost forming on the manor windows and the low groan of beams settling into their winter shape. It's the kind of morning where everything feels wrapped in wool, the air, your breath, even your thoughts. Agnes is already up. She's in the chapel this morning, lighting a stub of candle with practiced ease. No one asked her to do it, she just does. She lines the taper against the others, sits on the cold stone bench, and hums her familiar winding tune. You know it now, every dip and turn. But still it catches you. A servant passes by and nods in greeting. She's one of us now, he says a bit proudly. But not all of her is here. Because the truth is, Woolpit only kept one of them. The boy, her brother, is gone his small grave by the oak tree, slowly softening under the season's touch. You pass it sometimes and find little things placed there. A polished stone, a bit of cloth, one particularly confused beetroot. Offerings, perhaps, or just the village's way of acknowledging what it still doesn't understand. No name is carved on the marker. It's easier that way. Agnes never speaks his name either, assuming she ever told anyone, which is unlikely. But you know she visits, often, at dusk, alone. One day you follow her there, not to intrude, just to make sure she's warm. You hang back half hidden behind the brambles. She's kneeling by the stone, not crying, not even speaking, just humming. But this time it's a different song, lower, slower, older. The air seems to hold its breath while she sings. The wind stops pushing the trees. The oak branches lean toward her just barely. And for a moment you feel like the ground is listening. When she finishes, she stands, brushes her hands on her apron and turns back toward the manor. She sees you, gives a little nod, and says he is not alone. You don't ask what she means. Back in the main hall, the friar is organising scrolls and muttering about something called liminal bodies. He's planning to write a treatise on Agnes, not as a curiosity, but as a theological phenomenon. You glance over his shoulder and see titles like Of the Green-Skinned Pilgrim and Notes on Unfixed Selves. He's taking this very seriously. Agnes is less concerned. She's moved on to helping the cook with root pies. She mashes turnips like it's an art form, all while asking questions about pastry. But every so often something slips through, like the time she asked why people here bury instead of sending back. You blinked. Sending back where? She shrugged. Where they came from. Where they go. Where the green still lives. You tried to say something rational about returning to the earth, about souls, about rest. She only nodded. Yes, resting, but not sleeping. And once again you are left with more questions than answers. The truth is, no one here really knows what to do with her brother's death. Some say he was ill before arriving. Others blame the stress of the transition physical, emotional, possibly even metaphysical. A few still mutter that he wasn't meant to be here, that some border was crossed and the land simply refused to hold him. Historians still argue whether his death was symbolic or real, whether it represented a rupture between worlds, or just a tragedy misunderstood through centuries of folklore. You, however, remember his silence, his small fingers around bean pods, his smile brief but real when the cat surprised him on that first morning. He was here, and now he isn't. Agnes, on the other hand, becomes more present with each passing day. Her English improves. Her skin, while never losing that faint, mossy undertone, takes on the rosiness of cold cheeks and warm kitchens. She's quick to learn slow to speak, and faster to laugh than she used to be. But she never truly forgets. One afternoon you find her in the garden facing the filled-in Woolpit. She points to it. That was the door, she says. Or maybe the window. You frown. Which one? She grins faintly. Yes. She kneels, presses her hand to the soil again, and says, if he had waited, we could have gone back. This takes you off guard. Waited. She nods. He was afraid. Too soon. He ran toward the noise. I stayed behind. Then we bong fell. Then we were here. You sit beside her in the dirt. Do you think you could ever go back? She shakes her head. Not anymore. The door closed. The green is behind me now. You sit in silence for a while. Then she adds almost playfully, but you have good bread. And like that, the tension breaks. Later that night, she helps the friar transcribe a local legend into a careful new handwriting. She pauses halfway through and says, your stories are like ours, but with louder endings. The friar chuckles. We do like a good martyrdom. Agnes wrinkles her nose. We preferred quiet disappearings. You can't help but think her people might have had the better idea. And as you tuck yourself into your modest, straw-stuffed cot, the wind whistles through the manor stones. You dream of soft green skies and rivers that hum, of cows the colour of time, and of a boy who never quite arrived but left footprints anyway. The year turns. Winter folds into itself, and the world becomes soggy and brown again. The frost gives way to mud, the trees begin their slow, creaky stretch back toward life, and you can smell things growing again, even if you can't see them yet. Agnes no longer startles when dogs bark. She can split kindling now, although she still refuses to touch onions, and she's learned how to count coins. Correctly, most of the time, and now she has a name. Agnes came from the steward's wife, who said the girl needed something more dignified than the green one, and declared it in the middle of dinner. Agnes shrugged and accepted it the way she accepts most new things, with quiet amusement and zero ceremony. From that day on, the name stuck like porridge on a wooden bowl. With her brother gone and no family of her own, the manor becomes her life, her work, her story. But it's not charity. Agnes earns her place. She helps in the kitchen. She listens to the friar's ramblings. She teaches a few of the younger children how to hum her strange lullabies, which they repeat in cheerful mimicry. And she starts at last to speak about the future, not just the past. I want to learn sewing, she says one morning, sipping broth. Real sewing, not beans. You laugh. What did you sew with beans? She grins. Made goat's clothes. They hated it. She's funny like that. Dry. Slightly strange, but funny. Sir Richard begins paying her a small wage part silver part cloth, and she saves it diligently in a small pouch under her cot. You once peeked in and saw 4 coins, a green glass bead, and a smooth river stone. Her idea of valuables is still in flux. Word spreads beyond Woolpit. The tale of the green children trickles out through monastic letters, merchant stories, and wild exaggerations shouted in market squares. The details warp, of course. Some say the children rode in on lightning, others that they glowed like lanterns. A particularly imaginative version has them falling out of a tree shaped like a dragon. But Agnes doesn't seem to mind. Let them guess, she says. It's nicer than forgetting. One day a travelling tanner brings news from a nearby village. A nobleman is looking for a housemaid, someone quick, observant, and quiet. Sir Richard mentions Agnes. She says she'll consider it. She's older now, at least in spirit. Maybe 14, maybe 15. It's hard to tell, but she's ready. Before she leaves, if she leaves, Sir Richard has her blessed again, just to be sure. The ceremony is quiet. A few Latin words, a splash of holy water, and a barely hummed amen. Agnes stands still through it all, solemn but unfazed. She accepts the blessing, like one might accept a warm coat, nice, but not necessary. Later that evening she tugs you aside. What does blessed mean, she asks. You fumble. Safe, approved, touched by something good. She thinks on that. I liked the water part. You smile. Most don't. She shrugs. It felt familiar. You don't press. Time, as it tends to do, rolls forward, without asking permission. The steward teaches Agnes how to track inventory. The cook lets her take over stew duty on Mondays, and the friar, after weeks of coaxing, teaches her to read. You find her by the window one day, slowly mouthing through a copy of Lives of the Saints. Her lips twitch slightly when she reads about someone who turned invisible for 40 days. Is that normal here? She asks. You grin. No. But we like those stories. She nods. We had one too. Disappeared. On purpose. We left food. He came back. Your ears perk. Came back from where? She shrugs. No one asked. That would be rude. You stifle a laugh. Rude. She turns a page. If someone goes beyond and returns, you don't pull them back with questions. You let them sit in the quiet. You let that sit in the quiet. Eventually she decides to leave. It's not a dramatic departure. No teary farewells. Just a soft morning, a packed bundle of bread and cloth, and a new brown wool dress that fits her perfectly. So Richard gives her a silver coin. The friar gives her a prayer. The steward's wife gives her a long hug. You give her a scarf. She says, I'll send word. And then she walks down the dirt path. Less a lost girl now, more a story on her feet. You stand there watching, long after she disappears past the hedgerow. The breeze picks up lifting bits of dust. The wolf pit is still there, off to the side, now filled in and quiet. A couple of birds land nearby, pecking at something invisible. You don't know where Agnes will go, but you know, wherever she ends up, someone will ask where she came from, and she'll have to decide whether to tell the truth, or the version that lets people sleep at night. A few months pass, maybe more. The manor continues as manors do. Chickens molt, roof slates fall off, and are nailed back on. Someone tries to brew cider and fails spectacularly. Life in its muddy medieval way just carries on. But the absence of Agnes is noticeable in the way you feel it rather than see it. There's no humming near the hearth. No careful folding of napkins. No green cloth tucked between candle stubs. The silence she left is oddly shaped like the spot in a garden where something curious used to grow. And then one breezy afternoon a rider arrives. He bears a note. It's folded neatly and sealed with plain wax, no fancy crest, no ribbons, just a letter. You gather with Sir Richard the Friar and the steward to read it. It's written in Agnes's careful, slightly crooked hand. I am, well, the house is kind. The girl I serve is younger than me, but very loud. I like her. She tells jokes. I eat new things now. Pigeon, plums, something called marzipan. It's confusing, but I like the shape. I miss the hill with the goats. Not the green, just the goats. Tell the priest I don't glow anymore. I have dreams still, sometimes of the light, sometimes of the silence. I wake up feeling warm even when it's cold. You may keep the bean drawings. I don't need them anymore. Agnes. No address, no ask for reply, just that. You fold the letter slowly and place it in the friar's book. He closes it without a word. The steward clears his throat. Someone mutters about marzipan. And then the moment passes. But in your mind, it lingers. You think back to that strange day in the field, the green children blinking into the sun, hands clasped, unsure of where they were, or why everything felt too bright. You remember how Agnes began to bloom like a slow seed, and how her brother faded like mist under morning, and you wonder, did she ever really leave her green world behind, or did she carry it with her, stitched invisibly into her voice, her memory, her quiet? The friar later muses over a fire. Do you think she was ever one of us? You sip your broth. I think she became herself. He nods slowly. Perhaps that's all we're ever doing. That spring, a small patch of beans is planted behind the chapel. Not because anyone wants them particularly, just because. You walk past it often. The shoots are vibrant, curling toward the sun. You imagine Agnes would have said they weren't quite right. Not green enough, not feeling enough, but they're growing, and that counts for something. Word of her continues to ripple outward. A monk in Lincoln writes a poem about the girl who stepped between veils. A merchant claims to have met her and describes her as pale and strange, with a laugh like reeds in the wind. Someone else insists she was a changeling, or a ghost, or a saint. No one agrees. And Agnes, if she hears these things, doesn't reply. You receive another letter weeks later. This one is shorter. They gave me a new dress. It's blue. I don't hate it. You chuckle. You keep that one in your pocket for weeks. Over time, the villagers stop talking about the green children as a curiosity. They become part of the local colour. A footnote. A bedtime story. The Woolpit becomes overgrown again. The oak tree stands a little taller. And you still walk past that patch of beans, still hum her strange tune when the wind moves just right. Still think about what it means to belong somewhere you didn't expect to stay. One day as you kneel to tie your boot, a child walks by and asks, "Is it true she was green?" You look up and smile, only for a while. The years roll gently forward like the turn of a millstone, slow, steady, grinding down what was once sharp into something softer. Life in Woolpit reshapes itself again and again, as it always does. New children are born. Some old ones grow into apprentices, or wander off to become scribes or sailors, or in one rare case, a beekeeper who talks too much. But the tale of the green children never quite disappears. It hibernates. It curls into corners and sleeps. You see it sometimes in unexpected places, in the way someone hesitates near the wolf pit, now nothing more than a sagging hollow under crabgrass. In the way travellers ask about the girl from the underplace. In the songs children sing at dusk, slipping odd words into the rhyme. Words you know, Agnes once whispered by firelight. And every so often, a letter comes. They're never frequent, never long, but they come. The baby I help care for has 6 teeth. He bites everyone with fairness. There is a tree outside my window that creaks like the goats used to. They asked me to say grace before supper. I said thank you and meant it. You don't know if Agnes is content, but she is real. She continues. And that's a kind of peace. One foggy morning, a scholar from the West visits Woolpit asking questions. He's writing a chronicle of uncanny visitations, and he wants accuracy. You give him Tea-Watch, his ink freeze in the cold, and answer what you can. Yes, there were 2 children. Yes, one died. Yes, the other lived. No, you don't know if they came from fairyland, or a cave, or a forgotten village buried under centuries of shame and moss. You tell him she grew up, that she learnt to laugh, that she liked bread-hated onions and thought marzipan was confusing. He's disappointed. But what of the mystery? You smile. She is the mystery. Later the friar sighs. They always want the tale, not the person. You nod, and go back to mending a hole in your sleeve. It's tempting to romanticize it all, to say the green children were symbols of difference, of exile, of mystery, unsolved, to stitch their story into tapestries of meaning. But what lingers more is the quiet truth of it. They were here, once, briefly, fully, and one of them still walks somewhere under the same sky. One chilly evening, you find a parcel by the hearth, left by a traveller from the north. Inside is a folded cloth, green, not bright, not showy. A deep, mossy green. The stitching is odd, not uneven, just unfamiliar. A pattern of gentle curves like wind in long grass. Tucked within is a note. You once said I hummed in circles. I finally made one. There's no name. There doesn't need to be. You show the cloth to the friar. He squints. She never did learn proper embroidery. You both laugh. Then fold it carefully and place it in the chapel drawer with the other oddments, the rock from her brother's grave, the last parchment she drew beans on, and a scrap of the wool she wore the day she first arrived. It's not a shrine, it's just a drawer, but maybe that's enough. Sometimes, when the wind moves, just so you swear you hear her tune again, carried on the air from no direction in particular. A half-remembered hum, looping like breath, as if the land itself has learned the melody. You let it pass over you. Let it warm your chest. And once more you walk the edge of the field where she appeared, not looking for another, just remembering the first. Summer returns to Woolpit, with its usual understated flair, warm breezes buzzing bees, and the comforting scent of animals that are slightly too warm for their own good. The manor garden bursts back into motion. Cabbages balloon into little green planets. The peas rebel. The beans, of course, climb the trellis like they've got somewhere to be. And with the heat comes memory. Everything feels a little closer to that long-ago season, the one when 2 children stumbled or fell or emerged from nowhere and made a quiet ruckus in the fields. One afternoon, while sorting old parchment in the chapel's back room, you stumble on the friar's notes. His handwriting has softened over time, but the content is still sharp. The margins are filled with questions that spiral outward. What defines belonging? What is the boundary between real and remembered? At the top of one page is the line, Agnes never explained the goats. I never asked. You smile. Later that week, a travelling bard arrives in the village. He's tall, sunburned, and very sure of his own voice. He plays a song about 2 green children from the stars who speak in riddles and turn invisible when frightened. The villagers love it. They clap. They throw him bread. You sit near the back and say nothing. Afterwards he finds you. You're from here, he says. Did it happen? You shrug. Some of it. He nods like that's all he needed. Well, he adds, the story works better if the brother turns into a bird. You offer him more bread and send him on his way. Truth bends, you know that. But the core of it stays put, buried like seed beneath the noise. And when it grows quietly. That night, a strange stillness settles over the manor. You wander out beneath the stars, the fields whispering around you, and find yourself drawn again, always to the edge of the Woolpit. It's hardly a pit anymore, just a sunken place in the earth. Grass covered, soft-edged, nothing dramatic. But as you stand there, a chill runs up your spine, not of fear, but of recognition. You remember how it looked that first day? How the children emerged, how they blinked into the sunlight like dreamers waking up in the wrong story. And then you hear something behind you, not footsteps, breath. You turn, nothing. But there, resting on the old oak's root, near the filled-in hole, is a small bundle. You walk over slowly, heart tapping at your ribs. It's a pouch, made of that same green cloth. Inside is a single round bean, perfectly dried, smooth, and pale green, with the faintest shimmer under the moonlight. There's no note, but you don't need one. You close the pouch carefully and carry it inside like you're holding a relic. In a way, you are. The friar says nothing when you show him. He just nods and says, "She remembers." Over the coming weeks, something changes in how people speak of the green children. It's not a cautionary tale anymore, not quite a wonder either. It becomes soft, local, familiar, part of the land, like the fog, or the beans, or the sound the grass makes when no one is walking through it. A new generation of children grow up in the village. Some believe the tale, some think it's a joke. One girl insists she saw Agnes once in a market up north wearing blue and carrying a bird cage. You don't argue. Maybe she did. You keep the green pouch near the window, not to guard it, just to let the light hit it sometimes. To remind yourself that some things really do happen even if they don't make sense, even if they don't last long, even if they leave you with nothing but a feeling and a tune and a handful of dry beans. The friar, older now, and slower still, writes about her. But his tone has changed. He no longer tries to prove anything. He just remembers. The story begins to blur at the edges. You see it in the way villagers speak of the green girl now, not as someone who was here, but as someone who might have been. She's part of the scenery, half folklore, half former neighbour. They mix her name into riddles. A child asks you if green beans can talk. Another wants to know if eating 5 will make him glow. You tell him only if he hums while chewing. The truth is, Agnes is slipping into the place all stories go, eventually the soft in-between, where memory becomes legend and details stop standing still. And that's not a bad thing. It's just what time does. You sit with the friar one afternoon as he rereads his old records. The ink has faded, and so has his eyesight. He squints, muttering lines to himself. She said her world had no sun, but still had crops. She claimed goats wore moss. She insisted rivers glowed. He sighs. Did we imagine her? You glance out the window, at the patch where beans are beginning to sprout again. I don't think we could have. He grins faintly. Still can't explain the clothing. No one could. He shuts the book and pats it gently like an old dog. Maybe it doesn't need explaining. Maybe she was just a moment. And maybe that's the best description you've heard yet. Later that week, a wandering bishop visits the manor. He's polite, polished, curious in that broad strokes way of men who've heard too many half-truths and still collect more. He's here to verify the case as he puts it. He asks questions. How long was she here? Was she baptized properly? Did she ever show signs of possession? You answer as best you can, then ask him if he's ever tried broad beans roasted with rosemary. He hasn't. You fix him a bowl and change the subject. You don't say that the real magic wasn't in where Agnes came from, it was in how easily she became part of a place she wasn't supposed to belong, and how no one pushed her out. In the weeks that follow, stories about her begin to splinter. A travelling bard sings of her as a sea spirit. A monk writes of her as a vision from purgatory. A farmer nearby says she still walks the woods and steals eggs. The friar writes none of these things. Instead, he begins one final entry. She came from somewhere we do not know. She ate beans and sang in a language we never learned. Her skin changed. Her words grew roots. And now she lives somewhere we will never reach. This is not a miracle. This is not a warning. This is just a girl who stayed longer than expected. He doesn't finish the sentence. You tuck the parchment away along with the rest. Eventually the friar passes, quietly, peacefully, mid-prayer, mid-winter. You bury him near the Woolpit per his request. It's the only place weird enough, he had said. You plant a few bean seeds nearby just in case. Woolpit carries on. Markets open. Roofs leak. The beans strangely reliably thrive every year. And the story, it doesn't die. But it changes. New versions grow like ivy climbing the old truth. The green children become twins or cousins or royalty. The wolf pit becomes a portal or a punishment. Agnes becomes Agnetha or Alana or the girl who talked to trees. You don't correct them. What would be the point? Because the story isn't about facts anymore. It's about the quiet way a girl who should have vanished instead learned to bake, to count, to care, and to stay, just long enough to turn from mystery into memory. Years roll by. The wolf pit fades further into the ground, now just a dip in the earth where wildflowers take root and deer occasionally pause to sniff the breeze. The manor too changes. Stone walls, shift hearths are rebuilt. Names come and go. But somehow the rhythm continues. And somewhere in that rhythm, Agnes lingers. Not in body, no one's seen her in years. But in the songs, the drawings, the way children leave beans on windowsills for luck. In how some of the elders hum without knowing why. In how everyone agrees, strange as it was, she belonged here. One crisp morning, a girl no older than 10 runs to the edge of the field and yells, "I found a tunnel." You and a few others go to investigate. It's just a badger hole, but for a heartbeat, you feel something shift. Some part of you still folded neatly inside that old tale leans toward wonder. You remember Agnes's words, "It is not up, it is under." And for a moment, the thought of that glowing green land feels real again. You sit with the friar's old papers, sometimes rereading his notes. His final lines stay with you. She crossed the edge of what we know and chose not to vanish. That is miracle enough. You pass that thought along to others. You hear it come back to you in fragments. She chose not to vanish. A baker writes it on the wall above her hearth. She crossed the edge. A boy scratches it into the dirt with a stick. And you still walk the bean rows. One late afternoon, a woman stops by. Her hair is dark. Her eyes are steady. Her dress is plain faded blue with a patch of green at the hem. She doesn't say much, just stands near the old wolf pit for a while, touches the oak, then leaves again. You never ask her name. You don't need to. The next morning, a small pouch is found hanging from the chapel door. Inside, another green cloth folded around a sprouting bean still damp from the soil. You place it in the drawer. With the rest. That night, the wind picks up again. It hums the tune she used to sing. And even though the manor is quieter now, even though the friar is long gone, and the children of today wouldn't know a wolf pit from a laundry ditch, you still feel it. That curious, soft weight of a story that hasn't ended. Not really. And maybe never will. And now as the night settles in around you, as your eyes grow heavier, and your breathing begins to match the rhythm of the quiet world outside, let yourself drift into that gentle place between waking and sleep. Picture the rolling fields of Suffolk, soft hills kissed by moonlight trees swaying gently in the breeze, and somewhere a forgotten pit in the earth, now just a shadow beneath wildflowers. Imagine the silence of that place. Not empty, just still. Waiting. You're standing there, alone, but not lonely. The air is cool, full of the scent of damp soil and distant smoke. There are no crowds, no questions, just you and the slow exhale of the land around you. You crouch beside the old oak, run your hand across the bark, and feel something warm. Familiar, hum beneath your palm, like memory, like song, like the last words of a story whispered just for you. Maybe you dream of green skies tonight. Maybe you don't. But either way, know this. You've walked with a mystery. You've stood on the edge of what we know, and you've made it safely back, been in pocket story and heart, peace blooming where confusion once grew. So rest now. You've done enough for today. Let go. Let the story hold you. Let sleep come softly like green light through leaves. Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a chilly morning in the year 1492. Not to a royal court or a battlefield, but to a cabbage field in the quiet village of Ensisheim, in what is now northeastern France. Picture it. The air is thick with fog, the ground is damp with dew, and a farmer is muttering to himself about the turnip fief from 2 plots over. And then it happens. A sound, not thunder, not hoofbeats, but a hawk, a shattering boom that rolls across the village like a drumbeat from the sky. Windows rattle, chickens scatter. An entire cart of apples gets nervously overturned. Somewhere a goat panics and bolts directly into someone's laundry. You don't know it yet, but you've just witnessed what will later be called the Ensisheim meteorite, a 280-pound hunk of cosmic stone that has decided, for reasons known only to the universe, to nosedive straight into a cabbage patch in Alsace. You walk to the edge of the field, your boots squishing slightly in the soil. There's a crater now, wide, ragged, still smoking. The air smells like burnt cabbage and something metallic, sulphurous, not quite from Earth. Already the villagers are gathering. Someone yells that it was God. Another shouts that it was a warning. A third insists it's probably just a very angry angel. The local barber surgeon offers to touch it with leeches. No one is quite sure what to do. One man throws a rock at it. Another tries to poke it with a very long stick. You just stare. It's there. A rock that fell from somewhere else. Still warm to the touch. Still humming, if only in your imagination. Historians agree that this event, which took place on November the 7th, 1492, is the oldest documented meteorite fall in Europe, with eyewitness accounts and scientific interest. The Ensisheim stone landed with such force, it buried itself nearly 3 feet into the soft earth, and probably ruined a perfectly good crop of brassicas. What makes this all the more surreal is the timing. Remember, this is 1492. Columbus has just discovered the Americas. Spain has just kicked the Moors out of Granada. And here in quiet Ensisheim, the sky just spit a rock into a cabbage patch. Historians still argue whether the meteorite made more of an impact politically or spiritually. Some claim it marked an omen of great upheaval. Others think it just gave local poets something new to over-romanticize. You watch as the village elders arrive. They look at the hole. They look at the scar. Then they look at you. And because no one knows what to do with a rock that fell from the heavens, they do the most sensible thing anyone could they decide to guard it overnight. Which means you get to be on cabbage watch. You build a small fire, pull your cloak tighter and settle in beside the rock. It's still warm. Occasionally it lets out a soft ping, like a metal pan cooling down. You wonder where it came from, what it saw, if it passed near anything interesting on the way down. Then somewhere in the distance, someone plays a flute, badly. You lie back, stare up at the stars, and for the first time in a while, you realise just how many of them there are, and how small your cabbage patch really is. Morning arrives like it always does, grumpy damp, and with the distinct smell of wet cabbage. You stretch your sore back brushing soil from your sleeves and glance toward the crater where the rock still rests smug and immovable like it owns the place now. And honestly, it kind of does. Word has spread. By the time you've yawned 3 times and scratched your neck, once a small crowd has assembled. Not just farmers this time. Oh no. Everyone's here. The baker with flour still dusting his hair, the miller's apprentice who pretends to understand astronomy, even Margot the woman who insists she can talk to squirrels, and may or may not have cursed a man last spring. You overhear someone claiming the rock was actually hurled down by St. Michael himself as punishment for too many people bathing on Thursdays. Another whispers that it's the devil's egg, and if you crack it open all the frogs in France will boil. A child insists it's just a very unlucky potato. And through it all the rock just sits there, heavy, silent, spectacularly out of place. Eventually the magistrate arrives. He steps out of his cart like it's a royal litter, adjusts his robe with the seriousness of a man about to say something obvious, and announces, "This is not a normal rock. Stunning insight." He pokes it once with the end of his cane, then declares that the meteorite must be removed immediately and locked away for safekeeping. For science, for theology, for cabbage insurance, fraud investigation, unclear. But definitely safekeeping. A group of men is ordered to dig it out. They groan. The rock groans louder. It takes hours. They eventually wrestle it free and drag it into town like a prize boar. Children cheer. One of them names it Big Fud. You follow the procession into Ensisheim proper. Along the way, people toss flower petals, prayers, and one person's laundry accidentally. The meteorite is eventually hauled into the local church, set on a wooden platform, and roped off like an unpopular saint. From that moment on, it becomes a local celebrity. And like all celebrities, it brings out the very weird in people. One man swears that touching it cured his bad knee. Another says his horse spoke Latin after standing near it. A boy claims he saw it blink. It's now guarded day and night, partly to prevent theft, mostly to prevent people from licking it. Historians agree the event made waves far beyond the cabbage fields of Alsace. The fall was chronicled in multiple contemporary sources, including broadsheets and letters. A meteorite fall in the 15th century was more than rare. It was practically mythological. Something had to be behind it. Divine judgment, cosmic messaging, French tax reform. Still even now, scholars debate what the common people actually believed. Were they in awe, in terror? Just very, very bored and grateful for something to talk about. You personally are just trying to get your field back. But for now, you sit beside the church steps, watch villagers file past to gawk at the skyrock, and listen to the baker explain, for the 4th time today, how this is probably connected to the fact his sourdough failed to rise last Tuesday. As night falls again, the town square glows with lanterns and speculation. Someone's written a song about the rock. It's not good, but the chorus is catchy, and now it's stuck in your head. You lie on a bench, arms folded behind your head. The stars are out again. But tonight they feel a little closer. Or maybe it's just the smell of overcooked cabbage from the tavern next door. Either way, it's going to be a long week. You wake up to shouting. Again. But this time it's excited shouting less. There's a goat in the bakery again, and more. A man from Basel brought a scroll. You sit up on your bench, your neck complaining audibly. Across the square, a small wild-eyed man in a fur-trimmed cloak is waving parchment in one hand and gesturing wildly with the other. It seems that news of the Ensisheim meteorite has travelled beyond the local gossip circuit. Fast. The man is a messenger, or possibly a poet, or possibly just someone who walks very dramatically. He claims he's come from the University of Basel, where scholars are deeply interested in your rock. Or as he calls it, the celestial ambassador. You raise an eyebrow. He continues. According to his scroll written entirely in rhyme, the rock's fall was foretold by a wandering monk who once tripped over a goose and had a vision of fire from heaven. That part draws gasps. Someone asks if the goose survived. Meanwhile, townspeople crowd around the stranger, bombarding him with questions. Will more rocks fall? Can the stone speak? Can it be ground into powder and used for hair loss? He assures them, with all the confidence of a man who's never met a cabbage field, that this rock is an omen. Of what exactly depends on who you ask next. Some say it means France will win every war from now on. Others think it's a message to beware the Habsburgs, or possibly their eyebrows. One person insists it means you specifically should stop leaving boots outside your door. The theories multiply faster than rabbits at a spring festival. Historians still argue whether the fall was immediately interpreted as political symbolism. But in 1492, Europe's signs from the heavens were serious business. Comets, eclipses, meteorites, they were read like letters from God, and often used like political flyers. That's when someone very important decides to get involved. Emperor Maximilian I. Yes, that Maximilian. The Holy Roman Emperor, known for his military campaigns, his stylish armour, and his extremely long titles, hears about your cosmic cabbage rock and says something along the lines of, "Put it in the church. I'll be there shortly." You blink. Your town just got promoted. Preparations begin immediately. Flowers are gathered. Flags are hung. Someone tries to polish the meteorite, but it just ends up looking smugger. The baker bakes bread in the shape of a comet. It's overcooked, but enthusiastically received. Meanwhile, more travellers arrive, merchants, scholars, curious peasants. One man claiming to be a professional rock interpreter. He isn't. Entersheim, normally known for quiet markets and competent sauerkraut, becomes the temporary cosmic capital of the empire. You find yourself swept along in the buzz. You're asked to retell the story of the rock's arrival. So many times, you begin adding embellishments. Now there were 2 goats, the sky cracked open like an egg, and the stone whispered your name. You catch a glimpse of the meteorite in the church once more. Candles flicker around it. A few pilgrims kneel nearby, murmuring prayers. One of them offers it a small pastry. The rock remains silent, possibly judging. You lean against the doorframe and wonder what the stars will throw at you next. Hopefully not another boulder. But then again, it is cabbage season. When the emperor arrives, he does so like thunder on horseback. You don't see him at first, you hear him. The clatter of hooves, the barked orders in Latin and German, the groan of important luggage. Then suddenly, there he is. Maximilian Fuss. Cloaked in velvet, armoured in gold trim, and wearing the expression of a man who suspects someone moved his favourite wine. He dismounts slowly, with flair. The crowd parts like someone just sneezed during Mass. He surveys the square with a slow, calculating gaze. Then without a word, he strides into the church. You of course follow, along with half the village. Inside, the meteorite sits beneath flickering candlelight, still roped off, still sulking gloriously in its stone-faced mystery. Maximilian approaches it in absolute silence. He studies it. He circles it. He squints as if trying to determine whether it's truly spaceborne or simply an unusually large burnt bread loaf. Then finally he speaks. This is no ordinary rock. You blink. The man has an aura of authority, yes, but not necessarily a flair for originality. Still his words spark nods. Murmurs to ripple through the room like spilled soup. The emperor declares that this object, this stone from the heavens, must be preserved and protected not just by Ensisheim, but as a symbol for the entire empire. Cue dramatic gasp from somewhere in the back. Maximilian then makes a classic imperial move. He orders the stone to be chained in place. Yes, chained. Within, to the church wall, not to keep it from floating away, though someone did suggest that, but to ensure it wouldn't be moved, stolen, or touched by grubby local hands. Especially the ones who thought it could cure baldness or boils. Historians agree Maximilian used the Ensisheim meteorite to strengthen his political image, interpreting its fall as divine support for his military actions, especially against the French. The stone was literally turned into a medieval PR campaign. You watch as a blacksmith hammers the chain links in. Sparks fly. The rock stays silent. Later, someone pins a small handwritten sign to the rope, "Do not touch celestial property." This does absolutely nothing to stop people from touching it. Outside, Maximilian addresses the crowd. He gives a grand speech, one full of celestial metaphors, subtle digs at France, and an unfortunate comparison between the meteorite's fall and his mother-in-law's arrival last winter. You catch only pieces of it, distracted as you are, by a nearby nobleman who's trying to sketch the rock and keeps muttering, "Too round. No, too celestial." When the speech ends, there's applause. The emperor nods solemnly, then mounts his horse and rides off into historical ambiguity. The town bursts into celebration. Banners are waved. Bread is distributed. Someone releases a chicken by accident, and 2 children chase it all the way into the baker's cellar. Meanwhile, you sit in the shadow of the church watching the candlelight flicker against the meteorite's rough edges. It's chained now, still warm, still watching. You wonder if it's disappointed. After all, it travelled millions of miles across the void, crashed into Earth with cosmic fury, and now it's being hugged by iron in a village where people still argue about whether owls are lucky. You sigh and offer it a piece of bread. It does not respond. But maybe, just maybe, it appreciates the gesture. By now the rock is practically a member of the community. It doesn't speak, it doesn't pay taxes, and it certainly doesn't help with harvest, but it's somehow become the most talked about resident in Ensisheim. And like any local celebrity, it has its own scheduled rituals and increasingly bizarre fan theories. Today it's being interpreted. Not by Maximilian, not by the clergy, but by everyone else. You step out into the main square and immediately get handed a crudely drawn pamphlet titled 10 Things the Sky Rock is Trying to Tell Us. Spoiler, 7 of them involve goats. Nearby, a travelling mystic has set up shop. He's leaning against a crate, eyes closed, claiming he can hear the meteorite's soul frequency. Every time it's silent, which is always, he solemnly nods and whispers, "Yes, as I thought." Children gather pebbles and arrange them in meteorite-shaped outlines, reenacting the fall in interpretive dance. A baker sells celestial buns stuffed with onion, and someone paints a mural of the rock descending in a chariot of fire flanked by angels and possibly a confused duck. This would all be funny, except some people are taking it very seriously. The town priest warns that all this play acting could anger the heavens. He delivers a thundering sermon about the dangers of idolatry and space rock silliness, then promptly installs a small donation box next to the meteorite labelled "Offerings to the Firmament." You leave a coin, just in case. Historians still argue whether the townspeople saw the rock as sacred or simply novel. Some sources hint at genuine awe, others at opportunism. But what's clear is, the meteorite became a mirror. People saw in it what they wanted to hope, doom divine messaging, or the chance to make a quick coin. Meanwhile, the rock does what rocks do best. Absolutely nothing. And yet it pulls people. Travellers begin arriving from nearby towns, then from farther afield. Pilgrims, herbalists, merchants. One man brings an accordion and sings a 6-verse ballad about falling from heaven. The rhyme scheme is questionable, but he sells 3 copies of the lyrics. The town inn fills up. The blacksmith raises his rates. Even the turnip vendor starts offering meteorite-adjacent bundles, which are just the regular turnips, but stacked slightly closer to the church. You try to keep your routine. Water from the well, bread from the baker. A short walk to the cabbage patch, now memorialised with a tiny wooden sign that reads, "Impact site, please do not replant." But it's hard to stay normal when everything around you feels charged with meaning. Someone asks if you feel different since the rock arrived. You think about it. Your cabbages haven't improved. Your knees still creak. But sometimes when the wind is quiet and the candlelight hits the church wall just right, you do feel something. Not cosmic, not divine, just still. Like the air is holding its breath, waiting for the next strange thing to fall out of the sky you eyes. And in the meantime, everyone's making the most of what already has. At some point, it stops being about the rock and starts being about what the rock means. You sit in the corner of the square, watching yet another heated debate unfold between 2 equally convinced men. One insists the meteorite is a divine sign that France must prepare for war. The other argues quite passionately that it's proof God disapproves of fermented fish. They agree on nothing except that the rock definitely means something, and they're not alone. Across the empire, word of the Ensisheim fall has sparked a frenzy of interpretation. You overhear a merchant say a bishop claimed the stone was a message to cleanse the land of heretics. A nun claims it's a symbol of divine mercy shaped like a heart if you squint hard enough. A local farmer insists it resembles a slightly flattened sheep and warns his livestock to behave. Historians still debate whether this was religious fervour or political manipulation, or both. But in a time when the sky was still a divine domain, a rock plummeting from the heavens couldn't possibly be an accident. There had to be a reason. Humans as ever do not cope well with meaningless loud surprises. So the theories multiply. One scholar arrives with charts insisting the meteorite's angle of descent perfectly aligns with an obscure prophecy written on the back of a wine ledger. Another insists it fulfills a vision had by Saint Radbert of Worms, who once claimed stars would weep when kings began to lie more than usual. You're not sure how to fact-check that one. Meanwhile, the town has begun compiling all known interpretations on a scroll now dubbed the Great Rock Guessing List. It includes, among others, a warning of pestilence, a sign of bountiful harvests, proof that turnips are unclean, evidence of sky angels angry at wall colours. Each entry is taken extremely seriously by someone, but not everyone is impressed. One weary monk simply writes, "It is a rock. Rocks fall, this is not news," and walks away. He is not invited back. Still, the belief that the meteorite carries hidden meaning grows. A visiting priest draws a diagram showing how the rock landed exactly halfway between 2 monasteries, which he declares significant. He neglects to mention it's also halfway between the cheese stall and the well. You're invited to join a nightly prayer vigil beside the rock. You go mostly for the free cider. It's candlelit quiet and oddly peaceful, until someone tries to sing a hymn that turns out to be a drinking song with revised lyrics. The rock remains impassive. You begin to wonder if it's tired of the attention. After all, what if it's just a rock? A hurtling chunk of space debris, born in silence and fire crashing to Earth by sheer cosmic accident. No divine message, no political symbolism, just physics and chance, and a very unlucky cabbage patch. But of course you don't say that out loud. Instead you sit beneath the stars watching candlelight dance along the church walls and sip your cider slowly. The wind picks up. The meteorite, chained and unmoved, catches a glint of moonlight, and somehow you feel both very small and strangely okay with it. Because sometimes the universe does throw rocks at you, and sometimes you get to name them and charge visitors 3 coins for a look. If there's one thing you've learnt from all this, it's that if a mysterious object appears out of the sky, the church will absolutely get involved. Not immediately, of course. First they watched from a polite distance, probably muttering things like "we'll see if it glows" or perhaps it's French. But once it was clear the rock wasn't going away, and that people were treating it like the holy guest of honour, they moved swiftly and with impressive robes. You're summoned to the main square by the sound of a handbell, and a very serious-looking monk who declares this is a matter of heavenly consequence. You'd just been in the middle of feeding your neighbour's cat, who, to be fair, is just as unimpressed by meteorites as it is by prayer. Inside the church, candles flicker dramatically. The meteorite sits chained to the wall as usual, wearing its new identity as a sort of divine ambassador. Several priests have gathered in full regalia, one of them holding a thurible that's smoking so intensely it looks like he just wrestled a cloud. The bishop clears his throat. Brothers, sisters, and uncertain onlookers. He begins, "We are gathered not merely to stare at this heavenly rock, but to interpret its sacred message." You shift uncomfortably. You're not sure rocks have messages sacred or otherwise, but everyone else is nodding, so you nod too. The bishop proceeds to deliver a sermon that attempts to connect the meteorite to nearly every event in recent memory plague, recovery local crop success, the suspiciously early snowfall last winter, and even young Martin accidentally setting the chapel carpet on fire last spring. Midway through, a priest next to you murmurs, "Do you think it's blasphemous to call it a space potato?" You pretend not to hear. Historians note that the Catholic Church, particularly during this period, was quick to frame extraordinary natural events as divine communication. The fall of a meteorite, unexplainable by most commoners, would naturally be absorbed into a larger theological narrative. Everything from floods to fainting goats had at some point been viewed through a religious lens, and the Ensisheim meteorite prime material. Soon enough, a small shrine appears near the stone candle's flowers, even a ribbon someone claims was blessed in Rome. Pilgrims begin making short prayers to it. Not full-fledged worship, of course, just cautious requests like, "Please protect my soup from curdling," or "guide my cart safely downhill." Scholars still argue whether this drift toward reverence was official or just an example of medieval people making the best of a weird week. Some say the church encouraged it. Others say the priests were simply trying to keep up with public enthusiasm and didn't want to be outshined by a celestial boulder. You watch it all unfold with a kind of dreamy detachment. The incense, the chants, the flurry of sacred Latin, all wrapped around this silent stone that not 2 weeks ago was probably just floating peacefully through space, wondering what all the fuss was about. Then again, maybe it wanted the drama. You squint at it, still not glowing, still not blinking, still not speaking, but very good at keeping secrets. Later that evening, you hear rumours that someone tried to baptise the meteorite. Someone else tried to marry it. Both were stopped, barely. You walk home past the cabbage field, now fenced off and labelled Holy Impact Zone. It still smells vaguely like burnt soil and pride. You pause, look up at the stars and wonder how many other rocks are out there, waiting, watching, possibly planning to drop in. Hopefully not during soup season. You'd think that after a week or two the excitement would fade, that people would eventually go back to their daily chores, milking goats, complaining about taxes, accidentally burning porridge. But no. If anything, the meteorite has become more famous with time. And now it's generating art. This morning you wake to find a man in a floppy hat painting a portrait of the meteorite. Not the crater, not the townspeople, just the rock itself front and centre, wearing a tasteful halo and reclining slightly as if it's posing for a celestial fashion scroll. You glance over his shoulder. He's added eyelashes. That's new. Across the street, a local poet is shouting his latest work to a small crowd. The poem is titled Stone of Fire, Heart of Sky, and includes no fewer than 3 metaphors comparing the rock to a lonely widow. You applaud politely and try not to ask follow-up questions. In the bakery, a tray of sugar cookies has been shaped into tiny meteorites with icing cracks. Someone starts a rumour that eating one gives you prophetic dreams. You try one. You just dream about being late to work with no shoes. Back in the church, the meteorite now has a velvet curtain behind it and a hand-carved sign that says no touching, no whispering, no strange offerings. The last one was added after someone left a jar of pickled eggs and a poem written in goat blood. Not everyone is thrilled by the spectacle. A few villagers grumble that the rock has overshadowed everything else. The midwife complains that more people show up to watch the stone than to attend baptisms. The candle maker mutters that his best tapers are being wasted on a hunk of silent arrogance. And the cabbage farmer, he just wants his field back. Historians point to this period as the beginning of the Ensisheim meteorite's transformation from object of curiosity to full-blown symbol, not just spiritual or scientific, but cultural. Art versus culinary attempts it all fed the mythos, like medieval fandom, but without hashtags. Of course, with art comes interpretation. One tapestry displayed proudly near the inn depicts the meteorite falling from the mouth of a lion in the sky, which somehow also has wings and is crowned with a bishop's mitre. The caption reads, "A sign for the faithful." A child later adds a drawing of a goose beside it labelled Gary. You nod. Every legend needs a sidekick. One night, someone suggests holding a meteorite festival. At first, everyone laughs. But then someone says, what if we had meteor-shaped cakes? And someone else says, what if we reenact the fall with puppets? And suddenly, it's happening. Bunting goes up. A stage is built. A local man insists on playing the rock itself, wrapped in grey fabric and refusing to speak for authenticity. You're recruited to narrate. And so under the soft glow of lanterns before a crowd of villagers and curious travellers, you tell the story of the day a rock from space decided to crash into a cabbage field and ruin everything in the most interesting way possible. You look out over the crowd. They're laughing, leaning in, listening, and the meteorite's still chained, still warm, still smug. But you could swear for just a moment it's proud of the performance. Or maybe that's the cider talking. Either way, the legend grows. By now, you've accepted a few odd truths. 1, the meteorite has a busier schedule than you do. 2, your town is officially on the map for something that flattened a vegetable. 3, nothing brings people together like a flaming rock and an excuse to throw a festival every other day. This morning you find the town scribe interviewing people in the square, collecting meteorite testimonies for posterity. She's already logged 47. Some are dramatic. It landed exactly 5 paces from where my cow usually stands. A miracle. Others are less so. I saw it. It was loud. Your contribution, I was mildly inconvenienced. And now I can't plant cabbage. She nods. Emotional depth. I'll mark that down. What began as a cosmic accident is now a full-blown narrative machine. Everyone wants to be part of the story. Even people who weren't there. A shepherd from 3 towns over insists he saw it fall from his pasture and that it whispered his name. Someone else says they caught a piece of it in their shoe. You don't believe either, but you admire the commitment. Local tradesfolk start naming products after it. Meteorite mead, falling star soup, cabbage that knew the sky. The branding is relentless. One tavern even paints its sign to show the rock descending into a mug of beer. Business triples. You wonder if you should open a rock-themed souvenir stall, maybe space pebbles or official meteor dust, which would just be soot. Historians still discuss the cultural aftermath of the fall. The way myth and memory fused so quickly. The way people reached for meaning, for metaphor. Some saw it as divine punishment, others a divine gift, and some like you saw it mostly as a heavy inconvenience turned strange blessing. But beyond the merchants and mystics, something else has shifted. You notice people gathering more often in the square, talking, singing, trading not just goods, but stories. A travelling tinker tells tales of other strange skyfalls, blood rain in England, dancing lights in the north, a fish that allegedly fell from a cloud. You begin to realise that the meteorite did more than dent the ground. It cracked something open curiosity, not just about the heavens, but about each other. You overhear conversations that never would have happened before, a noble and a shepherd debating star charts, a baker and a monk arguing whether the stone is warmer on Wednesdays, a child teaching an old woman how to say asteroid in made-up Latin. It's bizarre. It's chaotic. It's kind of wonderful. And through it all, the rock watches. Chained, still, but central. You sit beside it one evening after the crowds have gone. The air is quiet. A few candles burn low. A dog snores nearby, probably dreaming of star chasing. You rest your hand gently on the iron chain. It's warm. Or maybe your fingers are just cold. Either way, you exhale slowly, watching your breath rise into the dark. And for the first time in weeks, you feel something close to peace. Because you lived through a celestial event. And now, you're part of a legend. It's been weeks now, maybe months. Time's gone a little strange. You measure your days not by seasons or market days, but by what the meteorite has inspired this time. Today a puppet show. Yesterday a song performed entirely in whistles. Tomorrow someone's planning to bake a cake shaped like the solar system with a walnut for Ensisheim. You can't help but marvel at how a single rock has somehow become the organising principle of town life. Even your cat seems vaguely reverent, circling it like it might drop a sardine. This morning, the town elders finally call a formal council to decide what to do with the rock. It's not that they want to get rid of it, but there are concerns. The floor of the church is beginning to warp under the weight. The nightly candle vigils are a fire hazard. And frankly, one too many people have attempted to lick it for celestial insight. So you gather in the town hall, well, in the alehouse, because the town hall roof leaks. 15 people crammed around a table, sticky with cider rings and deeply conflicting opinions. The blacksmith wants to move the meteorite to a central pedestal in the square. Let it be among the people, he declares, dramatically thumping his fist. The priest clutches his rosary. It stays in the church. Sacred things belong on sacred ground. The baker raises a hand. I think we're overthinking it. What if we just ask it? There's silence. And then someone writes, "Would you prefer indoors or outdoors on a piece of parchment," and tucks it beneath the chain? It does not answer. Historians still argue whether the debates around the meteorite were rooted more in politics or theology, or if the entire affair was simply the most organised case of small-town panic in recorded history. But what's clear is that the rock had become too important to ignore, and too heavy to pretend it was still just a curiosity. Eventually they vote. The stone stays where it is, in the church, but it will be surrounded by a specially built frame, gilded and engraved with a Latin inscription, Ex Caelo Descendit. It descended from the sky. You're the one who suggests the wording. No one else speaks Latin, so they just assume you know what you're doing. The church is rededicated. A new ceremony is held. Maximilian sends a curt note of approval, along with a very confusing drawing of a star with a moustache. No one understands it, but it's framed and hung beside the altar. You find yourself spending more time near the rock, not praying, just thinking, about how something so simple, a piece of the universe flung across space, could arrive in a cabbage patch and rewrite a town story, and your own. You used to be just a villager, a planter of greens, a mild avoider of drama. Now people call you the first witness. There are whispers you can sense sky things before they arrive. You can't, obviously, but you start carrying a walking stick anyway, for the look. As evening falls, you light a small candle at the base of the stone, not because you believe it needs one, but because it feels right. The flame flickers, the shadows stretch, and above you the stars watch silently, unbothered, unknowable, and full of more rocks waiting for their own cabbage patches. Not every visitor who arrives in Ensisheim is wide-eyed and poetic about it. Some are skeptics. Today a group of scholars in long cloaks and even longer beards shuffle into town armed with compasses, scrolls, and what appear to be suspiciously judgmental monocles. You can tell immediately they're here to debunk. They inspect the rock with the enthusiasm of men who haven't smiled in decades. One pokes it with a stick. Another takes detailed notes that say things like, possibly not blessed and no visible glow. You lean in. One mutters, could be a thunderstone, or volcanic ejector, possibly a prank by monks. You cough loudly. They ignore you. The scholars request access to the rock's exact impact site, which is now a fenced-off cabbage field featuring a small plaque, 2 gnomes, and a commemorative bench shaped like a meteor. They measure angles. They draw diagrams. One of them licks the soil. You decide not to ask. Historians still argue about the nature of these early investigations. Some say they marked a shift from superstition to science. Others argue they were more about ego than evidence, a race to be the person who explained the inexplicable. Either way, it was clear the meteorite had become a test case for belief itself. And the townspeople, they're amused. Let them poke, says the baker. They'll just end up writing poems with fancier words. But not all are dismissive. The apothecary offers the scholars a pinch of meteor dust. It's ash from her stove. They pay 5 silver for it. You try not to laugh. Too hard. Still, some of their findings are genuinely interesting. They estimate the rock weighs over 100 kilograms. They note its fusion crust, dark, slightly glossy, the telltale sign of superheated re-entry. They even propose a theory. The meteorite came from an asteroid belt flung earthward by a collision that happened millions of years ago. A slow journey with no destination in mind. Until boom. Cabbages. It's strangely comforting, that version. No divine mission, just deep space physics and a very unlucky trajectory. The scholars leave in a cloud of ink and self-satisfaction, muttering about catalogues and publications. They don't quite understand the townspeople, or why some still light candles for the rock, or why a child insists the meteorite grants good dreams if you sing to it before bed. But you do. Because something can be true and still be more than true. Something can be a rock from space and a symbol and a story. That night someone composes a song called Ballad of the Skystone Scholars. It's mostly polite, except for the bit about the monocle falling into a cow trough. You hum it as you walk past the church where the meteorite sits, quiet, patient, maybe amused. There's a particular kind of silence that only comes after a town's been collectively obsessed with something for just a little too long. You feel it in the square. Less hustle, fewer puppet shows. The souvenir stall has a buy one, get one parchment deal. The meteorite is still there, of course unchanged, unmoved, and seemingly unaware of its slow descent into being background noise. People nod at it now instead of gasping, and some daringly even forget to mention it in conversation. You never thought you'd see the day, but this isn't disinterest. It's something gentler. Familiarity, maybe. Like the town has decided you are ours, and we're done being weird about it. Mostly. There are still a few believers, like old Marta, who swears the rock hums when it's going to rain. or Thomas the Miller, who insists his back pain improves when he sits facing it. He still blames his taxes on solar alignment, but that's another story. What's truly fascinating is how the town has quietly shifted. Before the rock, Ensisheim was just another dot on the map, known for modest cheese and above average turnips. But now merchants pass through on purpose. Pilgrims still drop in, even if it's just to peek. And children grow up thinking it's perfectly normal to have a rock shrine in the church chained down like a sleepy pet dragon. Historians note this phase often occurs with extraordinary objects. The initial burst of drama fades. Ritual settles in. The event becomes memory, then tradition. That shift from happening to history is subtle, but it changes everything. You notice it most when a new villager arrives. A woman from a nearby town renting the weaver's old house. She walks past the meteorite twice before asking what the chain is for. When you explain, she blinks, then laughs, then asks if it's safe to sit near it with a sandwich. You assure her it is. In fact, you say it's best enjoyed with something warm like soup or cider. She nods thoughtfully. Later you see her resting on the church steps munching bread and cheese eyes on the rock. No awe, no fear, just comfortable coexistence. You smile, because that's where things are now. The rock isn't just an artifact or a warning from the heavens. It's part of the landscape, like the well, or the baker's chalkboard, or the way everyone in town insists they saw it first. You pass by it on your way to market, maybe tap the chain once for luck. You don't look for messages anymore. You just say quietly, "Still here, huh?" And it is. Seasons roll forward. Spring creeps in soft and green, waking up the trees and making the river just a little louder. Flowers begin to push their way back into the cabbage field, the impact site now covered in wild violets and one very confident dandelion. And yet, the rock doesn't care. It remains motionless, wedged between history and habit, still tethered by its now slightly rusty chain. You wonder if it notices how the world changes around it. The festival banners have faded. The weekly songs have become monthly murmurs. And some of the younger children have started calling it Grumpy Grandpa Rock, which is somehow both insulting and affectionate. Still, it's not forgotten. Every now and then, someone new arrives. A wandering friar, a merchant with a cart full of mirrors, a poet in a suspiciously wide hat. They stare, they make some grand pronouncement about divine signs or planetary paths, and then they leave mumbling or sketching, or grinning like they've just touched the edge of something secret. You're not jealous. Mostly. Historians often note this pattern. Extraordinary objects begin as events, then become relics, then slowly turn into mirrors. People see in them whatever they need to see. Hope, warning, glory, marketing potential. But for you, it's become something much simpler, a constant. On days when everything feels strange, when the skies don't match the season, or your bread refuses to rise, or your cat stares at the wall for 2 hours, you go sit beside the rock. You don't ask it questions. You don't need answers, you just sit. And if you close your eyes long enough, you almost feel it humming. Not loudly, not with messages, just a low, stubborn presence. Like it's saying, "I'm here. You're here. That's enough." One evening, after a particularly long day of failed laundry and accidental goat chaos, you fall asleep beside it. When you wake up, the stars are out. The church is quiet. And someone's left a single violet on the chain. No note, no name, just a small silent thank you to the rock that dropped out of nowhere and decided to stay. There's something reassuring about repetition. By now, you know every creak in the church floorboards, the rhythm of the candle wax as it pools, cools and curls, the way the morning sun paints one side of the meteorite, a soft gold like it's wearing a crown it didn't ask for. And every few weeks you hear the same question from a new visitor. Is it still doing anything? You smile. You tell them it's doing exactly what it should, which is nothing, and everything. Because it's not about action anymore, it's about presence. This strange, otherworldly object flung across incomprehensible space now lives in a town where chickens outnumber theories, and where the loudest sound is usually someone yelling that their soup is burning. And yet it fits. Historians note how rare it is for something so cosmic to become so domestic. But in Ensisheim, the meteorite isn't just a symbol or a spectacle. It's a neighbour, a confidant, a silent celestial roommate who never borrows your tools but always shows up in town gossip. Today a boy no taller than your hip approaches you in the square. He's holding a drawing. It's the rock smiling with arms and legs and somehow a moustache. He says he wants to dance, the boy tells you with total sincerity. You nod. Maybe he already did. That's why he crashed. The boy blinks, then laughs, then runs off to show the baker, who will undoubtedly hang it next to her increasingly absurd collection of meteorite-themed art. Later you help hang a wreath on the church door, not for a holiday, just because, and as you step inside the air shifts, not dramatically, not with the divine flair of that first impact, just a whisper of cool, a flicker of candlelight, the hush of something ancient and oddly content. You brush your fingers along the chain. It's worn smooth now from years of curious hands and quiet rituals. And you realise this stone has outlasted fear, outlasted fascination, even outlasted novelty. It has become home. You wake early, not because of anything dramatic, just a twitch of habit, the kind that settles into your bones over time, like where you hang your cloak, or how you fold the breadcloth after supper. You stretch, sit up, hear birds doing their best soprano rehearsal outside. And then you remember today marks 1 year. 1 year since the sky cracked and dropped a flaming stone onto a sleepy cabbage patch in a town that no one outside Alsace could previously locate on a map. You get dressed slowly, not out of dread, just ceremony. There's no official celebration, no parades or declarations. But people know. They nod to each other a little softer, speak a little slower, carry baked goods with an extra ribbon. Even the chickens seem unusually dignified. You make your way to the church. The meteorite is exactly where it always is. Still chained, still quiet, still profoundly unimpressed by human fuss. A few others have gathered. No speeches, just presence. Someone hums a melody that might have started as a hymn, but wandered into lullaby territory. A toddler leaves a piece of apple near the base. No one moves it. You step forward and place your hand on the stone. The chain clicks slightly, as if greeting an old friend. And for a moment your thoughts drift far beyond Ensisheim. You imagine the journey this rock took. Across cold, lightless space. Past moons dust the forgotten gravity of things that will never be planets. All to land here. Not on a battlefield. Not in a palace. Just here. A small village. A patch of earth that smelled like cabbage and now smells like candle wax and the faint metallic tang of reverence. Historians might never agree on what it meant. Was it divine coincidence, a cosmic shrug? But none of that matters to you now. Because this stone, this stubborn, star-warmed stone belongs. Not just to the world, or to science, or to the ever-expanding archive of strange earthly things. It belongs to you, to your town, to the quiet stories we build when the noise fades. The meteorite doesn't glow. It doesn't whisper secrets. But it stays. And sometimes, staying is enough. You step back. A gust of wind rustles the trees. The church bell rings soft once, and the world keeps turning. Now as you lie back, whether in bed, on a couch, or tucked into some cosy corner of your world, let your breath slow. Let the flickers of that story settle like candle wax finally cooling in still air. Picture the little village, the stone church, the faint glint of chain catching afternoon light. Picture the rock quiet, unmoving, but not unloved. It isn't loud anymore. It doesn't demand wonder. It just rests, like you are now. Maybe your breathing matches the rhythm of that imagined place, the hush of leaves, the shuffle of soft footsteps, the tick of candle flame in a brass holder. You've walked beside peasants and scholars, monks and mischief makers. You've watched art spring up from soil and seen reverence take the shape of soup stories and silence. And through it all, the rock has remained. So let that be your final image tonight. Not a blaze of light, but a presence that stays. Not excitement, but endurance. Not mystery, but a gentle knowing that some things are simply meant to arrive in your life, even if no one, not even the stars, can explain why. Close your eyes now. Let the hum of old stone lull you. Let the long, slow turn of the earth carry you deeper into rest. Sleep well. Dream gently. You are safe. The stars are watching.